Just a few years ago, it would have been hard to imagine leaders from the Gulf and Türkiye all together in the same room. But that's what took place over the weekend in Doha, where President Erdogan met with several Arab leaders just ahead of the opening of the FIFA World Cup. Qatar, which itself had suffered a blockade from its neighbors for nearly 4 years, has also seen its regional standing shift dramatically. During a reception right before the World Cup's opening ceremony, President Erdogan met with his host, Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Thani. Türkiye, which supported Qatar during the blockade, also sent 3,000 personnel to help the Gulf state with security during the tournament. Erdogan also met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, their second meeting in less than a week following the G20 summit in Bali. The two leaders have already met 3 times this year in person, reversing the tense relationship Ankara and Riyadh had seen since Qatar was blockaded back in 2017. And to further discuss Erdogan's visit to Qatar, joining me now from Dubai is Christian Alexander. He is a senior fellow at Trans Research and Advisory, a foreign policy think tank. And from Istanbul, Vehbi Baysan. He is an associate professor at Ibn Haldun University. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So, Vehbi, the opening ceremony of the FIFA World Cup saw regional leaders getting together and sending the message of unity. How has the region's political landscape shifted in the last few years?
Well, a lot, actually. We witnessed the exclusion of Qatar from the Gulf states, and it was really a struggling process for, I think, everyone, not only for Qatar. But in the end of the day, having FIFA's World Cup 22 at Qatar gave a great opportunity to leadership in the Middle East to reconsider, reshape, and realign their friendship, not only between the countries, but also the personal ones. So therefore, I find this World Cup quite a turning point in regional history, as we know that President Erdogan quite successfully met his old friends, old mates, and also it seems that there are realignments, refriendships, which Turkey is seeking to be part of it, quite rightly, because Turkey have a lot to offer to peace and prosperity in the Middle East.
So, Christian, is this a genuine realignment among the regional countries, and is it directed at any country? What do you think?
Well, I think it's being geared by ongoing developments on the grounds. I mean, all of these are reactions to pivotal events, be it the Arab Spring, economic downturns, military withdrawals, a change of the White House, the war in Ukraine. Most of them are reactive in nature, and the GCC countries feel more empowered and are left to enact their own policies and interests without having to necessarily rely on the US. But look at more regional actors, be they allies or non-allies, to guide their foreign policy trajectory in terms of diversifying their alliances. And this is mainly based on economic and military calculations.
So maybe Turkish and Egyptian leaders have also briefly met on the sidelines of the opening ceremony after almost a decade. How significant was this?
Very significant. We know that two countries trying to reestablish their relations. We know there are problems, but hey, in the international politics, actually what matters is the mutual interest in and regional interest altogether. So we know behind the curtains, the negotiations or meetings were taking place. I think it was very, very significant to both leaders shaking hand. That's a clear message that to these two, I think, very important countries, hopefully in the near future, getting together and working together for the Middle East, let's say.
Christian, so how do you think Turkish-Egyptian relations will move forward? I mean, what would the political landscape look like in the region once the both countries normalize their ties?
Well, it's hard to say, but generally speaking, I think, again, you see overall in the region a drive towards this normalization process that was put forward by Egypt by Turkey after its economic crisis. And I think that you see alliances being formed by different actors. Yes, Qatar has overcome the blockade. it's imposed its own views on security interests as a small state,
Yes.
and adjusting to the situation on the ground. But again, this is seen by the international community as Qatar having overcome the crisis situation, adjusted to the circumstances, persevered, and having made small adjustments. On the other hand, prior to the World Cup, there's been a lot of negative coverage of Qatar as the host of the World Cup, and focus on human rights issues. The awarding of the World Cup to Qatar and its ability to host the major events, and obviously calls for boycotts. But I think, again, there is a back and forth on this issue.
So maybe Qatar, as Christian said, has emerged as a key mediator in the region, including in helping Türkiye mend ties with Gulf and Arab states. What helped lead to that? I mean, how has it rebooted its foreign policy after the blockade was lifted?
That's to say that the Qatar went through very difficult times, but then that signifies the having good relations not only in the Gulf region but rest of the Middle East is very, very important. In that sense, Turkey tried to mediate between Qatar and the Gulf states, but now thereafter you find Qatar mediating between Gulf states and Turkey, and most probably, I think it is, I don't have certain information for it, but between Egypt and Turkey as well. So therefore, a meeting in Doha between Egyptian and Turkish leaders were very, very important. But that also shows us that the realignment or the shift in domestic issues so far as Middle East concerned is very important, because now that we have global crisis, not only financial but also energy crisis, as well as the environmental crisis, that leading to the countries to cooperate more effectively and more efficiently ever than before.
So Christian, just recently Qatar and China have signed a long-term LNG deal worth $60 billion. How significant is that, and what does it mean for the region as well as the U.S. interests in the region?
Well, it's a mutually beneficial deal. Obviously, China has ensured a long-term liquid gas supply for its economy until 2050. Obviously, the Chinese economy has somewhat suffered with the coming of COVID, so now it's back on track. But of course, Qatar has signed various deals with other countries, so it's not just an exclusive deal with China per se. I think clearly Qatar is banking on its strength and will strengthen its relationships with China, and the use of this will use this as a stepping stone for other issues and interests that might play into the role of Qatar in the China Belt Road Initiative.
So, VP, how would deepening ties between the U.S.'s allies and in the Gulf with China impact strategic and security ties with these countries? And can we say that Arab and Gulf nations are kind of moving away from their Western allies and pivoting towards Asia?
I'm not sure about that at this very early stages. I think we need more time to analyze it that way. In fact, what I believe is that China, in order to continue its growth rate as well as the production line, I mean, like any other developing countries, they need desperately the energy. So energy is in the Gulf, and they are kind of realigning their relations, and they probably will see in the Middle East in general more Chinese investments, as they are very aggressively doing it in Africa. But that doesn't mean really Gulf states moving away from alliance with the US, because they're not only strategic ties, but they're more than that. If you look at the past, for example, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, how the allied forces reacted to it to save Kuwait, etc. But I think they're also seeking other options in order to continue their strategic position in the region. So China is one of them. And, you know, in the past, they had kind of had relations just a few months ago with Russia, and then they were severely criticized. But I think it's just to have more actors in the region. That's what we're going to see. But obviously, it's going to be more challenging for the US.
So, Christian, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, how influential has China become in the region, given Beijing's rising influence? Would it be easy for the US to scale down its relations with regional countries to a certain extent?
Well, I mean, obviously, China's influence and standing is fairly high in the GCC. The GCC countries do not, believe that China is looking upon them with a Western view of things in its terms of its activities, and is more willing to pragmatically deal with many different actors. So again, China is viewed as not imposing its military or cultural interests on the countries, but is cherished for its economic ambitions and interests. Scaling down relations with China, I don't think that's going to happen, because clearly they're tied into different economic deals, and they're not going to move away from that.
So looking at the latest pictures coming in from Qatar, Vehbi, how have relations been repaired, let's say, between Qatar, Saudi Arabia, as well as the United Arab Emirates, and what are the major conflicting interests there?
Well, I think they had many issues, but I think we can count the priority of these issues given to the first of all, Al Jazeera broadcasting everything that annoyed a lot of the leadership in the Middle East at large, but also Qatar was accused harboring the Muslim Brotherhood leadership at Doha and establishing their centers and financing them, etc., which they long had a strategy to really minimize their effects in their countries. So that now it seems they find the middle way. I don't think Qatar gave up on their so-called independent broadcasting, but also totally banning or kind of excluding Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic organizations in their country. But it seems they're satisfied at a level to continue their relations. Well, this was the best interest for everyone in the region anyway.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.